We're moving right along. Our next session, how to rapidly advance digital transformation or get left behind. We have Chris Monberg, our Chief Technology Officer and Head of Product at Zeta. And we have Stephanie Liu, Privacy and Marketing Analyst at Forrester.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us to talk about digital transformation. So, Chris Monberg, I run technology and product at Zeta, and we're joined today by Steph Liu. Steph, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Liu. I'm an analyst at Forrester Research, which is a market research and consulting firm. Specifically, I cover the intersection of privacy and B2C marketing.
Fantastic. We've got a few topics we're going to go through today and talk our way through it. I'm excited to work with Steph, and more broadly, that seems like the wrong direction. And more broadly, working with her entire organization, Forrester, we rely on them pretty heavily to understand what's changing in market dynamics, what our customers are talking about, and where the gotchas are. In fact, right before this talk today, Steph and I were talking about the resurgence of preference centers as people are thinking about zero-party data and how it can do more than what it used to do. So it's a good way for us to get our ear closer to our customers. So to kick things off, the question is, everything's been changing. We've got cookies going away, IDFA, COVID changed behaviors a lot, and we've got more opportunities to ingest content and retail experiences than ever. Customer expectations. What are the headwinds in meeting customer expectations today?
I'll say this, it's a really fun time to be a privacy analyst. It is, I don't know many clients on the marketing side who would agree that everything's great right now. There's so many different headwinds that Forrester actually coined a catch-all term called data deprecation. And basically what it means is marketers' ability to access and use customer data has been cut off at the knees. And to very quickly summarize it, there are 4 different forces. The first one is consumers, right? They're becoming more privacy aware, they're a little bit more protective and choosy over when and how they share their data. And the Cambridge Analytica scandal, for better or for worse, played a huge role in educating consumers on how companies they've never heard of are getting access to their data, and how something as innocuous as a Facebook personality quiz can be morphed into, a psychographics profile. The second force is the tech and operating system restrictions. This is the much discussed or debated death of the third-party cookie. It's all of the different privacy features Apple has been rolling out. But it's also the privacy browsers like Firefox and Brave who've been blocking third-party cookies for years already. The third force is privacy regulation. I won't run through all of them. There are too many to count now. There's US state laws. There's even a federal privacy bill on the table, although the odds don't look good right now. But each of these laws, they introduce new requirements for consent and new limitations on how you can and cannot use consumer data. And finally, you have walled gardens. These are companies who know they're sitting on really valuable consumer data, so they're putting in new limitations on how marketers can access that data, how they can use it, et cetera. And you have more walled gardens on top of that as companies like Target, like CVS, like Walmart realize they too have valuable data and they can build their own walled gardens. So really, it's an unprecedented time in terms of the number of hurdles and how high those hurdles are for marketers to glean customer insights, to know their customers, to understand what they want, and how to deliver good experiences.
So the 3 major jobs, acquire, grow, retain, what are you seeing organizations doing? Are they going and minting partnerships with Target? Are they thinking about their technology differently? What strategies can they take forward?
All of the above. Yeah, so it's a lot of the marketers that I talk to say we need more data. So that could be trying to acquire more from third parties or partnering with the likes of Target, et cetera, to try and understand their customers. But really the emphasis right now is on capturing more first-party data, which is a totally understandable reaction when you're losing insights into who your customers are. You want to try and build that direct relationship, get to know them directly, but it's getting really hard to do that because consumers, again, they're wary of how and who they share data with. And so it becomes a balancing act of how you ask for that data and how you use it to benefit the customer and encourage them to share data again the next time you ask.
What's the research say on sensitivity to collecting data? Like as a technologist, I may clear my cookies, I may not. Are people doing that more so? Is it stabilizing?
So they're becoming more privacy aware, which means they're taking more actions to protect themselves. But we have a whole body of research that basically shows there are 5 privacy attitudes. It's not a binary, you care about privacy or you don't, right? There's some who will freely share data, sort of no exceptions. They love when ads are spot on targeted for them. My sister-in-law is one of those people. She's sort of the counterbalance to me as a privacy analyst. On the other end of the spectrum, you have like the tin hatters, as I affectionately call them, who have locked down their devices and their data sharing as much as possible. But there's also groups in the middle who will share data if you incentivize them to. If you give them perks or exclusive offers, they will sign up for your loyalty program. They will share something about themselves.
And do you see any divides along demographics or ages? Like are millennials out there locking things down, or Gen Xers are saying you can have everything for free?
It's an interesting question. So in the early days when we started doing the segmentation, the group that would freely share, we call them reckless rebels. They used to be sort of your stereotypical millennial Gen Z, sort of like, I love TikTok and their algorithm's great. They can have all of the data under the sun. As things have changed though over the last 4 years, reckless rebels have actually become a much broader set. They have almost equal representation across all generations now. So there are some people, and we can guess as to why that is, if it's like a sense of fatalism of, privacy is dead, so whatever, take my data. If it's people who genuinely love personalization. But it's still only about 30% of the US online adult population, but it is an almost even split of young and old and everyone in between.
Fantastic. Personalization is an expectation of the internet, yet we find ourselves increasingly not wanting to give over our personal data. It seems like there's an opportunity in the not too distant future to get this right. Do you think anybody's figured it out quite yet?
I don't think anyone's nailed it quite yet, but there is.
Say Zeta. Zeta's no, just joking.
Sorry, Zeta's doing great work. There's actually some really great examples from the beauty world, which usually catches people by surprise. But if you think about a beauty purchase and the kinds of data points that influence what products you'll like, it's things that you cannot buy from a data broker. You cannot infer it from someone's purchase history. It's things like if you have oily skin or dry skin, your skin tone, your hair type. And they've gotten really good, typically as part of a loyalty program, of building user-friendly quizzes where you volunteer that information. And when Sephora makes product recommendations to you, it will say why, like an eyeshadow for your green eyes only, a foundation for your light complexion. And if any of that's wrong, it has the edit your profile. And what I love about it is very explicit. Here's what you've told us about yourself, and here's how we're using it. And that to me is the way customer data collection should be, right? It should be transparent about why you're asking for it, how you're using it. And it's so much better, and it's a better experience than trying to guess. Because if you are guessing someone's skin color and you get it wrong, that's going to make a lot of your product recommendations useless.
I love that. Explainability is something that comes up a lot. Do you get a lot more inquiries about zero-party data in general, people collecting more data? And we have customers and prospects and the audience trying to get a read for, are people really honed in on this?
Yes, it has been my #1 most popular inquiry topic for 3 years straight. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, zero-party data is a term we coined 5 years ago now, and in short, it's data that a customer is volunteering. So it's not something you have to share as part of a transaction. It's something you're sharing because you like the brand, because you're getting something in return, like telling Sephora the inner details of your skin type, for example. Marketers are really interested in how to get that data, how to use it, especially in light of data deprecation. But the challenge, again, it's how you ask for it in a way that explains the benefit to consumers and makes it explicit. Here's what we want, and here's why, and here's the benefit you'll get, so that people actually do share the data, and again, will volunteer it the next time you ask.
That is fantastic. Thank you. I'm trying to go to the next slide. Oh, it's my little computer hands. I need to push harder. Expectations. So with the changes that have happened, and for those that were downstairs earlier, we talked a lot about technology changing, organizations have to change, and there's this coupling of marketers having expectations of what they can do and meeting consumers' expectations. What do you see happening or needing to happen inside marketing organizations to meet their customers' expectations?
Yeah, so expectations are high, right? Customers, they're not necessarily looking at a brand and segmenting it by department or by channel. And that's a really tough challenge for a lot of brands today. It's things like not sending a marketing message to someone if you know they're going through a really difficult customer service ticket, right? That requires so much orchestration of different departments, different data sources, different tools. Even something as simple in air quotes, as not duplicating an email and an SMS and a push notification across different channels. I talk to many brands who are struggling with that today because as marketing grew, as we got more digital channels, people would very easily, very quickly tack on a new MarTech tool to cover whether that's SMS or push. And now we have these MarTech stacks, and they are powerful in terms of the channels, the kinds of experiences they can deliver, but they're not necessarily well orchestrated, and it's creating some bumpy experiences. But you know the struggle better than I do. Actually ironing out those kinks, breaking down walls between data sources, between technologies is really difficult.
It is. What strikes me is that organizations have a lot of very powerful tools, and they're managing each of them individually within different groups. So you may have, we have lots of customers that have like 4 or 5 different email platforms they're using throughout the organization. Each of those are tied to 4 or 5 different CRMs, for lack of a better term, where they're managing a customer relationship. And as a technologist, I hear that, I'm like, whoa, why don't you just have one? But it's because of the reality of their business and politics and legacy and the way organizations grow, which is fine. The downside, the risk is that we have bad experiences. I don't know about anybody out there today, but I've had some bad flights before, and I get off the flight, and the first thing I get is like an email to go to Hawaii or something. I'm like, I never want to see this airline again. You guys should have sent an email that said, sorry for being late. Here's 10,000 miles or something to that effect. They're just missing an opportunity to cultivating brand loyalty. Brand loyalty is under attack too because we have so many choices. Maybe not as much with airlines, but I live in San Francisco, so I certainly have my options to get to a place like New York. But certainly when it comes to retail, and I can buy anything I want off of Amazon.com. I can also buy anything I want off Instagram.com, which is like a really interesting conundrum where choices are abound. I think what needs to change, and I'm not certain of this, is that the data strategy conversation has to happen much earlier in people's transformation. Just this past week, we started working with a company, and they are trying to figure out which RFP to run next. They had just bought a CDP, and they're trying to figure out if they need to do a CRM next. And they were smart to stop and say, actually, what are we trying to do here? Forget the technology. How do we start servicing our customers' expectations in the right way? How much time do you spend talking to your customers about data strategy earlier on in the process?
Not enough. I get calls, I'm really interested in pick your 3-letter MarTech acronym. I want to go buy one. Who's out there? Who's the best? Who should I shortlist? And my colleague Joe Stanhope always asks, when it comes to CDPs, if the perfect CDP were to fall in your lap, what would you do with it? How would you use it? And the most common response I would hear for that question is personalization. Okay, let's break down what that means. What are you personalizing? Based on what data, in what channels, and what kinds of experiences? And that part hasn't always been thought out. It's sort of like, well, we'll buy it and then we'll figure out what to do with it later, which is a huge role of how we got into this quagmire in the first place. And so now, as companies are trying to figure out how to get the most juice from their first-party data squeeze, it's, okay, what data do we actually have to work with to begin with, and how can we make sure we're using that effectively? And sometimes, yes, tech is a crucial part of the solution, but oftentimes it's about figuring out where you're starting, because companies are trying to, in some cases, throw money at the problem and buy their way out of it, but that's not really a long-term solution.
I see that with the RFP process, which has served a necessary process in organizations for years and years and years. But it's almost irresistible. You're like, oh, I need a CDP. I'm going to buy a CDP. I wonder if there's going to be a merging flavor of digital strategy where people are just by default going to go through a data strategy process before they ever open up an RFP for another technology. I'd like to see it happen personally.
Same, that would be great.
That would be great. Awesome. All right, my computer hands work this time. So challenges. The question talks about the risks and benefits of getting it right. I think we all know the benefits of it. They're important. They're great customer experiences. With things like data governance and privacy, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on what the risks of getting it wrong are and what you're seeing in your day-to-day research.
Sure, so there's always the scary arm of the law, right? There's regulatory fines, there's all of that. There's the bad publicity if you get not necessarily breached in the security sense, like someone's hacked into your system, but breached in the sense that you are caught inappropriately sharing data. Grindr is one example of that. There was a very splashy headline about a Catholic priest who had to resign because his publicly available data showed that he was a user of Grindr and that he was going to gay bars. And unfortunately, he faced a lot of backlash for that. But regulation and bad publicity aside, there's also the real risk of losing customers, right? Of those who just feel so creeped out by either your advertising or your marketing practices that they no longer want to do business with you, or they delete their account, or they update their preference center with junk data because they're just fed up. I think the benefits, I don't want to downplay them, right? The importance of doing right by your customers, of delivering good experiences, is really, really important. And I think it's also really important to understand that there are different privacy attitudes. Not everyone's going to want to share data with you freely, and marketers have to be okay with that. It is very different from the decades that we've had of ready access to customer data. But I think respecting our customers and trying to do right by them and acknowledging different privacy attitudes is crucial.
What about the risk mitigation? There was a day when you could have all of your risk mitigation put under like a chief privacy officer, or you had a security and compliance team. You kind of skirted everything over there and said, just keep an eye on it. I'm going to keep doing my day-to-day job. What about the director of marketing that's bringing huge amounts of data into a system that might have been homegrown or built over time and doesn't have those same security controls in it? Are they more vulnerable? Are they creating a risk for the brand?
The short answer is yes, marketing is risky, right? We're capturing so much data. We're buying data of different levels of provenance. And it's just inherently, from a purely privacy governance standpoint, yes, it is risky. That said, it's really important for marketers to get involved in their privacy and legal teams. Don't throw it over the fence, because what happens when you do that is things like May 23rd, 2018, it's 2 days before the GDPR is going into effect. And I am getting frantic calls from marketers in Europe who are telling me, My legal team just killed half my MarTech stack because it's not compliant. What do I do? It's like, okay, we told you this is going to happen. We told you there's this huge privacy law coming down the pike. And when CCPA was coming, we did the same thing. I was proactively telling all the marketers that I was talking to, please don't sit back and think your legal team and your security team is going to take care of this. They will make decisions that impact you, and you might as well be at the table and a part of those conversations. And again, that challenge isn't going to go away. There's more privacy laws coming at the state level, at the possibly the federal level. And so from things like data governance and risk, they're not traditionally part of a marketer's dictionary, but they should be. And I'm not saying marketers need to be experts here, but please do get involved. At least understand who your security and legal teams are and be a part of those conversations.
So as data became more available, we saw analysts joining the marketing team. We even, in some cases, see data ops or engineers joining marketing teams. Do you think with privacy and governance becoming more top line, we're going to see more like a marketing chief privacy officer that's embedded in the group and helping them to understand how their curriculum and their data gathering practices hold together? Or do you just think we'll bridge more of those two groups as a steady state?
I think it's going to be more of a bridge. So a lot of the organizations I talk to, privacy isn't, yes, there is the chief privacy officer, but they're not solely responsible because privacy it's so broad and so important for almost all departments in the organization, right? So a lot of them are actually cross-functional groups, which is why I'm saying marketing should be at that table. And usually what I'm seeing now is that there is a liaison for the marketing team because it is a pretty unique mix of understanding the different laws and understanding how marketing is using data, right? Because it flows to so many different partners, so many different tech providers that it's scary when you first look at it from the data governance perspective, but it's not all bad, right? It's not all inherently, oh, we can't do that. And so I think the collaborative aspect of that is really important. And it's also marketers' job, I think, to represent the customer in those conversations. It's not just how are we keeping the business safe and out of trouble, it's how are we doing right by our customers? Are we asking for consent in a human way, not one that was pulled straight from a law that basically parrots the GDPR and your cookie consent banner, but is it something that a typical person, not a privacy professional, not a lawyer, a typical consumer would understand?
We're going to use your data to market to our partners. Is this okay with you, yes or no?
Right, or defining what a cookie is. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, sure, that makes total sense. Fantastic. So the last question of the day is about the future. I might need them to click it forward. So the future. A lot has changed and a lot has stayed the same, especially in marketing, depending where you work and where you are on your digital transformation. I don't know if we need to do like a Jules Verne, like way out futurism thing, but what do you see as the most necessary changes for us to adopt strategies, curriculum, and ultimately relationships between brands and individuals?
I think it comes down to what you said earlier about actually taking the time to build a data strategy. It's not just, I want more data. It has to be, I need this kind of data that enables me to do this experience for the customer that will improve X, Y, or Z and tie back to business outcomes, right? And that's not a small undertaking. I totally understand that. But right now, this panic of, I just need to get more data, I'll figure out what to do with it later, is so short-sighted and really flies in the face of the consumer privacy trends that we've seen. So I think that would be number one. And number two is to really emphasize, again, how the data is going to benefit the customer. I think that piece of the equation has been overlooked for way too long. It's all about how it's going to benefit the marketer or the business, and the customer falls to the wayside.
I'd add to it that we need to reduce complexity. So I was reading an article about Tesla recently, and they're trying to figure out how to make a chassis more efficiently. And they think they figured out a way to build a chassis, a car chassis, with 3 parts instead of something like 138 parts. And the complexity of that is actually astounding to me. What are the chances that those parts are delayed, get lost, don't fit, they need to change something about one of the parts, and it changes their whole line? They lose a lot of control. And so as marketers go through and try and reduce complexity, I think it's going to require organizational change. Instead of having people that make all 138 of those parts, you're going to need probably a lot of car designers that are thinking about what the final outcome of the car is and the driving experience is. And that means reducing a lot of the upstream pieces of the conveyor belt, as you're putting experiences together. Technology has a role to play in it, is my take as a technologist, but organizational change is the only way that technology is going to work. Otherwise, you're going to end up with another grab bag of solutions that have overlap. You're going to be managing preferences in 6 different places and have a new problem of how do you merge preferences together so that you can understand individuals. I really enjoy what you're talking about with regards to transparency, and I'd point to that as another part of organizational change. We all know we can't create better mousetraps sustainably. That's not the way to build your brand. You have to build authentic connections. So how do you have tools available that creates transparency that's easily conveyed to those individuals? I have been through you have green eyes, you have brown eyes, not for makeup, but the equivalent of that for me. And it's infuriating to go through that experience. So I think it has to be embraced throughout an organization.
I would agree. I explained earlier what zero-party data is, and it's my hope that the debate over what is first-party data, what is zero-party data ends, because I think the most important part of zero-party data isn't the firm definition, it's how you capture it. And it's really the principles of, again, being transparent about why you want that data and delivering a benefit to the customer. Really, I think those principles should apply to zero and first-party data, regardless of, oh, it's just loyalty data, this is nothing new, which is fair. But it's really how we can be more customer-centric in our data strategies and in our data practices, and how we carry that through to the tech we use, and how we surface those options to consumers.
I'm going to have to go on Sephora and buy some eyeliner to see how they do it. I appreciate that. Be around for pictures later. Steph, I wanted to thank you for your time up here today. This is really awesome. Opportunity for people to hear from you. You're a wealth of information, and we've loved working with you.
Thanks for having me.